quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch. Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
As you can see, Wookie was paying attention to his introduction. He wants to make sure that it has been properly produced and edited. And John Voight is the one who did this for us. Marvelous job. The Wookiee gives it 2 paws up. We're going to continue our series on Shabuwah. This is part of the basics. We're getting quite in depth on this because it is the next harvest, and there are lots of questions and interest in Shabuwah. So it's my pleasure to reveal once again what we can deduce from the prophets and the Torah regarding this ingathering. I think that Shabuwah is going to have a 2-phase fulfillment. We're just exactly now 30 days away from not just a celebration of Shabuwah, but a Shabuwah of tremendous import, because this is the Shabuwah that began the time of Israel's troubles. Will be 7 years from this Shabuwah of horrible consequences for Israel and for Jews worldwide, prior to the Messiah, Dod's, return as our king with Yahweh, our God, on Yom Kippurim, following the fulfillment of Teruah in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033. So we know that this is going to be a monumental celebration of Shabuwah. As I say, it is just 30 days from now. It's the 22nd of May. Today is the 22nd of April. So we are just exactly 1 month away from the fulfillment, the beginning of the time of Israel's troubles. The second portion of Shabuwah, which is the harvest. It is a harvest of mature grain that is going to take place on June 11th of 2027, just as all hell breaks loose in Israel. And that's going to be also the time of Al-Aqsa flood 2.0, but this time 1,000 times worse than it was previously, with millions of militants and Islamic jihadists ransacking Israel as opposed to just 4,000. So unfortunately, that is the news, but that is how it's going to play out. And we are now in Yeshaya in the 57th chapter, because he has a lot to say about the Shabuwah harvest. And at this point, the only thing that we have not witnessed, although we have lots of indication it's going to occur, we have seen Donald Trump appear as the great betrayer of Israel, as the man that was prophesied that would betray Israel, commiserate with the fulfillment of Shabuwah. And he is literally demon possessed. He is Satan incarnate. Christians would call him the Antichrist, but in the Torah and prophets, he's called Rahab. And he's absolutely demonstrated that he is precisely who we said he was. And that's a huge part of this, because Yeshaya, Isaiah 17 and 18 blend the Shabuwah harvest with the arrival of the Torahless one, who is the great betrayer, Rahab, together. We've also seen the world turn exceedingly anti-Semitic. We've seen Israel isolate itself from the world, and we've seen the forces that hate Israel swooping around as if vultures to pick the bones. And this is also part of the prophecies. And the only thing we have not seen thus far is the forfeiture of the heart of Israel, where the state is narrowed at the waist to offer the Islamic militants an Islamic state that will be so devastating to Israel, because Israel is completely indefensible once that occurs. But That is part of this process as it relates to the fulfillment of Shabuwah. And we have not seen that yet, although I think it is on the horizon. Um, when Donald Dumpster recognizes that he really has no leverage in stopping the war, opening the Straits of Hormuz, maintaining America's presence and the Arab fiefdom so that he can prolong the petrodollar conspiracy that has managed to elevate the U.S. Economy above what would normally have occurred without the petrodollar, where the U.S. would be bankrupt. There is no way for the U.S. to service $40 trillion in debt. And the only reason that there is the illusion of solvency is because of the petrodollar. And with that being destroyed by Trump's last war with Iran, and with the U.S. bailing out of its defense agreements as part of that accord, with each of the Arab Sunni fiefdoms around the Persian Gulf, there's only one way really to beg one or two of them to maintain the petrodollar system, since now Russia, China, and Iran are doing all trade outside of the dollar, and the dollar has declined now to 57% of reserve currency trades, and it will plunge much lower than that in the near future. And so the only token that Trump has to offer the Islamic fiefdoms that he all but destroyed in this war, and to negotiate an end to this war, is to offer the heart of Israel, and to offer the Muslims what they value, which is not to create any habitation for the Fakistinians. They despise them as much as the rest of the world outside of Marxists. They want, though, Israel destroyed. And the easiest way to destroy Israel is to create a Fakistinian state. That is the final solution. And so I think Trump will offer it. We're told he's the great betrayer of Israel. And now that Israel is vulnerable and has no backing, and if there was a UN resolution now, the U.S. would vote in opposition to Israel as it relates to the imposition of a Fakistinian state. So I think the trying to get out of the Iranian war is going to be the impetus for it to save the petrodollar. And even then, it's only going to elongate the demise of America by a year or two. That's about all he's going to be able to buy for ravaging Israel. So when that occurs, then there's really nothing left to accomplish to fulfill both aspects of Shabuwah. All right, returning to Yeshaya, Isaiah, the earth, as we know, is going to plunge into a time of darkness and deceit, of destruction and death, with Donald Trump as Rahab leading the way. And Isaiah says of those contributing to and participating in this ashaf, this ingathering, that is commiserate with all of that, that they will arrive. They will come and be included, reconciled and restored, intact and healthy, satisfied and content, blessed and prosperous in favorable circumstances, quite literally saved, shalom, safe and sound. And they will be spiritually restored and comfortably settled. They will be nuach. They will be favorably associated and allied within his restful environs, his lodge, pondering the implications of relaxing while being contemplative. It's a working vacation, if you will, moving about and walking around while conducting their lives in a manner which is right, fitting, and proper, appropriate, justified, and quite honorable. Yeshaya, Isaiah 57:2. Pretty terrific, huh? So God says, yes, those who will disappear on Shabuwah for this harvest, uh, they are going to end up reconciled and restored, satisfied, content, blessed, prosperous, and very favorable circumstances with the Yahweh. They're going to be spiritually restored, comfortably settled within his restful environs. They're going to move about and conduct their lives at that point in a manner which is, well, right, honorable, fitting, and proper. So it's Shabuwah Shalom. It's Ashaf Shalom. The Sadak will be Bo and find Shalom. From a planet rife with raw, rotten, we will take the ride of a lifetime to Shalom tranquility. Yahweh is withdrawing his covenant collaborators and contributors from the rot of man, where by God's sons and daughters are going to enjoy the most satisfying circumstances imaginable. Shamayim will be to our liking. Reconciliation and renewal await all of those who are going to be received on this day. Now, I have always perceived heaven as a place where we're up and active. And I think that is reinforced here by Halak moving about. And since our inclusion will be predicated upon being Sadak right, it is expected that Shamayim, the spiritual realms, will accommodate that which is Nakoa, fitting and proper. And it's my hope, and indeed God's expectation, that those who invest the time to read and become vindicated are going to exit this planet with us, so that we don't have to endure that which is going to be so horrific on God's people. There will be pestilence, there will be war, there'll be disasters and human failures, runaway inflation and economic collapse, total anarchy. And I think a host of natural disasters as well. All while the world promotes its favorite conspiracy: blame the Jews. Specifically addressing the clique of malcontent conspirators that we talked about yesterday, who have sought to claim this Shabuwah harvest for themselves as a voice of, well, their mother goddess. Well, of course, disparaging Yada, Dod, Yahweh, and the Ruach, especially the volumes of Yada Yahweh and the Yahweh vlog. All under false pretenses, mind you. We find God outing and lambasting them. This is really interesting because the Shabuwah harvest was the huge part of the point of divide. They wanted to claim it for themselves, and well, God doesn't seem to agree with that. It says, but for all of you, those of you who are still present, wanting to approach at this time, you are the children of false pretenses, under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman who was deliberately conjuring a false spirit to obscure reality and to blow smoke as a sorceress. Oof. Beni Anan, you are the offspring of a female who is genuinely and intensely committed to pursuing a demonic spirit, to actually occlude observations through sleight of hand and fortune telling. Poel, peel, call, participle, feminine, singular, active, absolute. The seed, Zerah, the offspring and the product of Naaf, the adulterous one, who is unfaithful, disloyal, unreliable, and religious. of the one soliciting lovers by way of idolatry and veneration of false gods and of false spirits. And Zana, a despised whore, the loathed woman prostituting her despicable nature by pandering to her partners for favors and bribes. Zana, the shunned and scorned harlot and immoral prostitute who feigns love for adulation and money. Call imperfect, ongoing behavior, quite literally happening. Third person, feminine, singular, active. Yashaya, Isaiah 57:3. Wow, that's quite the prophecy, and it's directed at a very small group of people, but they have done their best and they will continue to try to undermine this effort, and God's all in with what we're accomplishing together. There is no alternative to this, and those who pretend they are God's enemies. Yahweh's assessment is directed specifically toward those who are both ra'ah, evil in their shepherding, and troublesome compatriots, those who are wickedly wrong and who are trying to ascertain why others were taken and they were left behind during Shabuwah. We know this to be true because God said, "But as for all of you, those of you who are still present, desiring to approach at this time," now especially relevant in this regard, is that Karab, in the imperative mood, reveals that these people wanted to be part of the harvest. And that means they knew about it and they coveted it, but are also excluded from it. And as such, this places a bullseye on the mother goddess conspiratorial clique. No one else on earth that meets all of those criteria. Pains me to say that, but they have done it to themselves, and God is none too pleased. There is no rational way to deny the realization that the people Yahweh is specifically denouncing for having fallen under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman conjuring false spirits, is directing our attention to the malcontents congregating around a woman whose name I don't even want to say, but they know who they are. They actually listen to these programs. DP would be the initials. Now, this cannot represent religious Jews because there are no ingatherings of souls associated with Judaism. Therefore, they cannot be Christians because their rapture is on Teruah. Misled by Peter and Paul, Christians believe that Shabuwah was fulfilled as Pentecost with the birth of their church. And in addition, Paul claimed that the rapture would occur on trumpets. So it can't include Jews, can't include Christians. And there is no such harvest of Muslims. And of course, Marxists aren't expecting to go anywhere. Narrows it down considerably to the malcontents who claim to be part of the covenant and then abandoned it to pursue the voice of a mother god, all while claiming that Shabuwah was their harvest. Having eliminated religious Jews and faithful Christians from the mix, we also know that this despised clique of the Zana, the despised whore, can neither be numerous nor have a significant audience, or else this repudiation of them would be in conflict with the previous statement in Yeshaya's Isaiah 57:1, where we learned that relatively few are going to pay attention to what occurs. Therefore, apart from their irritatingly negative antagonism towards those who will be ashaf, withdrawn, this is an otherwise meaningless cast of fools, devoid of understanding. But it isn't meaningless to Yeshaya, nor to Isaiah. The book of Yeshaya was written to inform the Choder how to do his job. And the Choder is leading this harvest. It is a book detailed to tell Yisrael how they should respond to the Nakar, the Choder, the final Zeroah, all prophetic depictions that this cult now denies. Now, that said, we must also confront the realization that this is among the longest, most detailed, and vitriolic condemnations that are found anywhere in the Torah and prophets. Yeshaya is upset because he's all in with the final Zeroah, the Nakar, the Choder, the voice, the coal of Yahweh. And therefore, anyone who is an affront to him, who tries to demean his credibility, is an enemy of Yeshaya, and he wants to shut it down. That's why this exists this way. Therefore, this otherwise irrelevant assemblage of miscreants have garnered Yahweh's unbridled animosity through his prophetic reflections given to Yeshaya. And in this context, it's obvious that it has been for their aversion to the Nakar, the observant foreigner, and plans pursuant to the Shabuwah Katsir that cause God to hate them. This is a very important event for God, because it's these individuals that are going to be the teachers, the guides, leaders, not only of the most important time of the witnesses to encourage Israel to return, beginning on Passover in 2030 and running through the fulfillment of Teruah. But they're the guides and exemplars, the teachers, the arbitrators, the administrators of forevermore. For these individuals, this is not a vacation. This is an opportunity to be revitalized, to learn, to further explore all God has to say about what he is trying to achieve during the 1,000 years of Sukkah, as the final remnant is returned to the garden and given the opportunity to earn God's trust. And anything that stands in the way of that, since it is essential to the fulfillment of Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, that's devastating. And, when this group of malcreants first departed, my view was, okay, goodbye. I wish them well. Two of them in particular, I thank for their prior contributions. And I thought that was it. God would find replacements and we'd go on. They wouldn't allow it to be that way. They began writing very despicable, condemnable, slanderous, contemptible letters, one after another, and sent them to virtually every covenant member, trying to lure them away. And then they began to infiltrate every social media account that we were conveying information on, and we were able to read their eternal communications where they bragged about what they were doing. So there's no hiding from it. We know exactly who they are and exactly what they were doing because they bragged about it. And then they started sending out hateful emails to everybody on my email list. And then posted all manner of just reprehensible scum everywhere. They wouldn't go away. They're still out there, still actively condemning. They couldn't draw an audience, so they pretended they were me. They used my translations. They used my translation style. They copied our new logo. They copied the website that I had designed. Copied it all, just trying to pass themselves off at me while condemning me. And then their only way to draw in an audience was to hashtag my name while disparaging me. You know, when you have people that you once worked with, you know, the woman that led this cult, I did more for her than anyone in her life by a long shot. Gave her enormous amounts of money to keep her afloat. Protected her when she was vulnerable to others. Encouraged her. Listened to her. Tried to lift her up. All the while she was scheming to undermine me and to lure others away. And she did. And so God's disgusted. Just as he, you know, you look at the situation, because when this happened, and I asked, yeah, what would you like me to do? You know, when you're dealing with nutcases like this, the best plan typically is just to ignore them. And initially, God says, you got a lot of work to do. Let's ignore them for the moment. I want you to rebrand the books, rebrand the site, and I want you to start doing this Shabuwah vlog. And, you know, we transformed our lives and our home and everything and began doing as God had asked. And then they continued to be exceedingly belligerent. And I said, okay, good. I did what you asked me to do. This is an insider attack. This is very hurtful. And I'd done so much for these people and never asked anything from them. And so I said, so what do you want me to do now? No, this is the problem. What do you want to do? And he said, I'll take care of you. Every time they say something, I'll have the answer. And he did. Every time they said something, God would direct me directly to a prophecy pertaining to them, like this one. But the first time when the Mother Goddess says, yeah, this cult said, we speak for our Mother God. And so Yahweh asked me to, he asked me to speak, to go directly to Numbers 12, what he asked. And I did. And there was the story of Miriam. And she disparaged Moshe's wife, just as this cult went just full tilt, trying to disparage my wife. And then she claimed we too speak for God, just as this cult said they're now the voice and speak for a mother God. And so there in Numbers 12 was the whole story. And God says, you know, I'm all in with those that I have announced that are working for me. And Miriam, you're not. DP, you're not. And so it was quite the revelation, because what we witnessed was to see God not only stand behind Moshe, who he had committed to speak through, but he struck Miriam with leprosy, banished her from the community, and ultimately used her as the example of permanent divorce. And all she did is, we too speak for God. She didn't go off and disparage Moshe. She did disparage Moshe's wife. What this cult did was infinitely worse. And at a time where there's no option, there's no other solution. So this is why God has presented time and again the answer for us. And here it is again. So an otherwise irrelevant group garnered God's animosity and his prophets as well. And their claim to Shabuwah was part of the problem. Trying to deprive God's voice of credibility was part of the problem. Disparaging my wife, who is essential to this mission. She's the Amma, the mother of the covenant. She does all the branding for yada.com. Yada.com, if you haven't been there, and if you're not using it routinely, shame on you. It's a spectacular website. It is absolutely aesthetically beautiful. And its functionality is extraordinary. There's nothing like it anywhere in the world. It is the most supportive family library in the world. There's just nothing anywhere close to it in terms of supporting and encouraging a community of people in service to God. Go, please, check it out. It's astonishingly beautiful and magnificent in its capability. And, the former site that I designed and had all my books on, this psychotic woman's accomplice took down not once but twice. It's a criminal act. So God's really upset. I wouldn't challenge him on this. He has reason. The whole of Yeshaya, Isaiah 56 and 57 leaves us with no other rational option than to conclude that this hideous condemnation is focused on the same psychotic woman previously condemned in prophecies associated with Shabuwah, which we've detailed at considerable times. Shabuwah is a model for what we have witnessed. Miriam, as I've said, and even Michal, which was absolutely pertinent, as was Shabuwah. Shabuwah wanted to be a mother goddess. Miriam wanted, we too speak for God. And Michal condemned Dode, our Messiah and Savior, for a display of nudity when it was wholly important for the circumstance. 3 women, prophetic models for what we have witnessed. Their story in Genesis 2, Numbers 12, and 2 Sam 6. They depict this psychotic woman and her embittered conspiratorialists. They alone have claimed Shabuwah as their harvest while writing themselves out of it. And when they did this, it served as a real eye-opener for us, because I had previously been of the contention that once covenant, always covenant. But that's just not the case. Miriam is absolute proof. So would be the other two women, Michal and Shabuwah. Shabuwah was literally linked to Adam, and Adam's the most important person in human history because he would later grow into Dode. And here she is, created by God and in the garden. And I'm telling you, she is definitely not part of the covenant now. And Miriam was divorced, estranged. God, from his, it's like your father spit in your face. And yet she was a prophetess. So she went from covenant to totally and completely excluded. And Michal was Dode's first wife. Dode is the ultimate man. He is the exemplar of the covenant. He's the man that actually made the covenant possible through the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim. Married to Dode, daughter of the first king of Israel, and she's excluded now too. So that's what we learned. And then we went back to the story of the garden to find out why God booted Adam out of the garden and yet still loved him. And we learned it is because God has expectations of us. He is not going to take somebody into the Shabuwah harvest for them to have this grand vacation because there's too many other things that come along with it. And if you're not aware of that, God, by choosing those he is going to harvest as part of Shabuwah, he is going to empower and enable them by an infinite amount 4 times over to go from being a soul enveloped in a decaying physical body that is stuck here on this planet to a soul enveloped in light energy that is elevated from the 3rd dimension through the 4th time, through the 5th and 6th into the 7th, is such an enormous enablement that these individuals are going to be able to speak things into existence. You could talk to anything in the universe and alter it, and you're immortal from that point of view. Enormously powerful. And God's not going to trust anybody with that level of power to literally destroy the universe unless he knows for certain that they're really good listeners, that they're observant, that they're thoughtful, that they're responsive and rational, but most importantly, trustworthy. And the way that you prove that you're trustworthy around God is when you make a mistake, you correct it. And when you trip and fall, you get back up. And you're steadfast. You're resolute. You're dependable. You make a commitment to work with him, and you complete that mission. You do not bail out. And that's what we learned. So, while it may seem like such an insignificant number of worthless humans, the 24 lost souls operating under the influence of the mother goddess will somehow cause, through their intermixing of truth and lies, upward of, well, I would say it's probably 1,000 Jews to hesitate relative to the harvest, such that their progress is impeded and they are left behind. You know, anytime you assail somebody, as they do, particularly as they hashtag my name on the internet, it's a stain forever. And they've done this to disparage Yahweh, to disparage Yahweh's children. So Yahweh views this as an unforgivable crime. And far worse than that, God sees it as damnable. Therefore, the cadre of characterless co-conspirators who will be left behind at this time, while expecting to have been part of the ingathering, are said to be Beni Anan, children of false pretenses, under the spell of a demonic woman, deliberately conjuring false spirits to obscure reality and to blow smoke. And that's really bad. And this does not help. Beni Anan, you are the offspring of a woman who is intensely committed to pursuing a demonic spirit to occlude observation through sleight of hand and fortune telling. Anan is a sorceress. That's worse. In the participle form, Anan is a derogatory and actionable title, depicting someone who is demonic from God's perspective. In the Poel stem, those beguiled by her rather than seen as victims of her seduction are presented as collaborating with her. They give her credibility. They encourage her. Under false pretenses, they willfully and knowingly deceive while trying to obfuscate the truth. This means that they are equally committed to promoting their demonic diatribes as they are to slandering those who have earned the right to participate in the harvest. From this point forward, and inclusive of Anan, sorceress, indeed throughout this entire denunciation, beginning with the 6th statement, almost every verb will be presented in the second person, feminine singular, addressing one very nasty woman. This is something I have not witnessed previously in 25 years of translating God's testimony. Clearly, Yahweh hates this woman and despises those who have supported her. However, before we get to the 6th statement of the 57th chapter, it's the entire contingency of the demonic whore who are being condemned by God. Beginning here with Korab, it reveals that a number of men and women have opted of their own free will to anger the Almighty while operating under this woman's spell. Further, we find Naaf revealing that the degenerate woman has a male accomplice, someone who is unfaithful, disloyal, unreliable, and religious. And indeed, she does. You see, DP's cohort is Decrud because he is her chief solicitor and enabler. Without him, the sorceress has no influence. Now, this man who has written hideous letters to covenant members about me, hideous. I mean, they're irrational. They're just so ignorant and so vengeful. I've shared them on these in prior programs. I've actually revealed exactly, read them openly because they're so ludicrous. He is the spawn of the Anan demonic woman, making him Naaf, someone who venerates false gods. And as the lead devotee of the mother goddess, his job is to seek lovers for the sorceress, drawing people in to venerate her. And he did. With the Naaf written using the Peel participle, there is no refuting that this Decrud has earned his dubious distinction of disloyal and unreliable. explicitly by enabling the Anan sorceress. And that is exactly what we have witnessed. I have the letters and the other evidence to prove it. And God is fully aware of it. Now, this brings us to our third successive participle, a verbal noun, Zana, loathed woman. Therefore, in addition to being Anan, a demonic woman, and the devil's advocate, the subject of Yahweh's ire is a Zana, a despised whore. The Zana panders to her partners for favors and bribes. She took me, I'll tell you. This scorned harlot and miserable prostitute feigns adulation and love for money. And that is precisely our experience with DP. So as we press forward with our evaluation of this prophecy, let's remain grounded within the context in which it has been delivered. God's rebuke is so focused and so personal. It's important that we remain cognizant of the crime that led Yahweh to this point of evisceration of this person's character. For this is what Yahweh says: you should choose to be observant, carefully considering and closely examining the means to exercise good judgment and justly resolve disputes, making good decisions. Then choose to engage so that you act upon that which is correct and vindicating, because my deliverance and resulting salvation are approaching. They are close, imminent, and personal. Therefore, the Tzedakah Ani, the one who is correct about me and vindicates with me, will come to pursue the harvest. He will be included and return, then remain, so as to be revealed and made known. That was Isaiah 56:1. Blessed by the benefits of the relationship, joyous and productive by showing the proper way, is this person as a mortal man who acts upon and engages in this with unfolding implications over time. Because this Son of Man, this lone man, he will be exceptionally firm and resolute in this, empowered and strengthened to prevail, restoring through his conviction and resolve with regard to this. By closely examining and carefully considering the Shabbat and the promise of 7, thereby avoiding defiling and profaning it or making it common, he is being observant, careful, attentive, and aware. So his hands, and especially that which he influences, will be kept from acting upon or engaging in anything unjust, immoral, or irrational, troubling, or distressful. Yashaya 56:2. So do not say regarding Ha-Nakar, this son of a foreign land, the one who knows and understands through thoughtful examination, then acknowledges by being discerning and respectful, who has formed a relationship and joined with Yahweh, something which would infer Yahweh will surely abandon me, preventing me from being included as part of his family. And let not the Saris, this esteemed and authorized official designee, say, what then, if I become a withered and unproductive tree, an incapacitated counselor, or a paralyzed messenger? Isaiah 56:3. To the contrary, this is what Yahweh says on behalf of the Saris, this esteemed and authorized official designee, who has been subject to castration as a result of the positions they have taken as leaders. They provide guidance regarding the benefits of the relationship by being consistently observant and actually attentive while actively exploring and investigating my 7 Shabbat promises. So they have chosen, preferring at this time, my will and my appreciation, my revealing of the correct path to the benefits of the relationship. Therefore, they are positioned to be overpowering and intense, uncompromising and firm, unrelenting and effective, shazak, with my covenant. Then I will offer freely giving at that time to those in my home and in my family and within my protected enclosure, a hand, an outstretched, welcoming, supportive, and empowering hand, and a name even better and more beneficial and more valuable than other sons and daughters. I will give to him an everlasting and eternal, personal and proper name, a designation and reputation, which, for having shared the benefits of the relationship, will never be removed or taken away. 56:5. The children of the Nakar, this observant and discerning foreigner, they have formed a relationship with and adhere closely to Yahweh, to serve, attend to, and assist him, loving and adoring that which is associated with Yahweh's name, continually demonstrating that they exist as his co-workers, always observing and noticeably examining while considering the Shabbat and the promise of 7. All around Shabuwah, is it not? Making it special by avoiding disrespecting anything associated with it. They're uncompromising and strengthened, devoted and unrelenting, established and firm. Shazak again. In my covenant. Yeshaya, Isaiah 56:6. I will bring them at this time to my set-apart mountain. I will cause them to rejoice, such that they are elated in my family and home, to be distinct, separated, and set apart, of intervention and intercession, of judgment and decisions, and of being assessed and evaluated. Their uplifting and elevating offerings and the sacrifices slaughtered for them are acceptable and approved, especially satisfying on my sacrificial altar. This is because my home and family will be invited and summoned, read and recited, called out and proclaimed, a home and family of reasoned requests and sound judgment. For those who are set apart, distinct and uncommon, and of intervention and intercession, even of assessment and evaluation for the entire family and all people. Yahweh, my upright one and foundation, who gathers and assembles yet again the scattered of Yisrael, and those who engage and endure with God, announces in advance of it occurring, I will obtain, bring together, and assemble before him those collected and obtained by him. Isaiah 56:8. Every beast and animal of the country and open environs will choose to come to devour and destroy every living thing in the thicket and the foliage of the tree. Those who are the watchmen assigned to be lookouts are blind. All of them are ignorant and opposed to Yada. Without understanding, without revelation, they're unaware, unable to teach. They're clueless. They are universally contemptible, rife with emotion, akin to dumb dogs, incapable of intelligent speech. They're without the capacity to understand or the ability to prevail, and they will not succeed as they're utterly incompetent, unable even to bark, panting while dreaming and thus hallucinating, lying around smitten with their inactivity and lack of awareness. And so those overly emotional whores and malcontents have an intensely fierce soul. They're stubborn, they're self-willed. They will never acknowledge that they have gone too far, never admitting that they are gluttonous and unrestrained, as they are insatiable, never satisfied. Those acting as shepherds, clamoring for authorization to lead and feed the flock, they're not yada, because they are ignorant and irrational, devoid of understanding, neither perceiving nor comprehending, and thus lacking the capacity to make intelligent decisions and connections. All of them have turned to their own way, every person after their own ill-gotten gain and dishonest advantage, acting like thieves, without exception or restraint, and to the very end and to their demise. You should agree to come, consenting to assemble together to change things around. I have decided to obtain and accept. Intoxication is what they're going to profess, with confusion and insobriety of wine. They are intoxicating. So God, reading their minds, says, we have chosen to be habitually inebriated, constantly consuming intoxicants and sundry liquors to the point of being incapacitated in our judgment through fermented libations. Therefore, it will be, and he will exist like this today. Tomorrow, if the days to come are opposed and delayed to a significant extent for the thousands of remnants. That's where I got that number. God says that they have made a mess of things. And that, like it is on this day, it will continue tomorrow and the days to come, and to a significant extent for the thousands among the remnant. Then the right and vindicated will vanish. They're going to disappear, such that those who remain will not know where they have gone. No one will give it any thought or meaningfully ponder the implications. Loyal and devoted individuals who are steadfast will be harvested, gathered together, and taken away during the Ishaf, the ingathering, while no one makes the connection to comprehend why. For indeed, away from the presence of this evil shepherding, this disastrous calamity caused by troublesome former compatriots, miserable companions who are wickedly wrong, those who are correct and upright, innocent, will be gathered in the harvest, and they're going to be removed and received. That was Yeshaya 57:1. And they're going to arrive reconciled and restored, intact and healthy, satisfied, content, prosperous, in a very favorable circumstance. They will be spiritually restored, comfortably settled within his restful environs, moving about, conducting their lives in a manner which is right, honorable, fitting, and proper. Isaiah 57:2. And that is what led to this. But as for all of you, those of you who are still present, those who have wanted to approach at this time, you are children of false pretenses, under the spell of an Anan, a demonic woman, deliberately conjuring a false spirit to obscure reality and to blow smoke as a sorceress. You're the seed of Naaf, the adulterous one, who was unfaithful, disloyal, unreliable, and even religious. And Zana, this despised whore, this loathed woman prostituting herself and her despicable nature by pandering to her partners for favors and bribes. Yeshaya, Isaiah 57:3. It is from this vantage point, one which reveals the timing of these events, the identity of the hero and of the villain, and the basis of the argument Yahweh continues to make against them, and for one and against the other, as he critiques this adversarial contingent of conspiratorialists. Anag, ridicule, as the opening verb in this next segment of the rebuke, well, it was scribed in the hitpael imperfect plural to reveal that this demonic woman's rebellious and condescending brood will continue to mock and slander on their own initiative. Mother Goddess, I guess, didn't have a role. On what basis have you, without any actual guidance or provocation, independently and continually become so effeminate, overly sensitive, whiny bitches, self-entitled crybabies, delighting in ridiculing and mocking because you are so easily swayed to incitement? Anag. I want to tell you, you couldn't have chosen a better depiction of what we have experienced. No actual guidance, without provocation, independently, continually, as if they're all effeminate. They're overly sensitive. They're whiny bitches. They're self-entitled crybabies, delighting in ridiculing and mocking, so easily swayed to incitement. Anag, have you all, apart from others, uniquely become so readily swung by a woman, shedding all traces of masculinity? Got no backbone, overtly prone to derision, enjoying being slanderous without any prior inducement, exploiting another while taking pleasure and acting like overly emotional, needy, and gossipy women, hopelessly relishing contempt, pliable and without substance? Hitpael, imperfect, second person, or against what and whom do you open your mouth and boast? Why are you so continuously covetous and greedy, and then profuse in your communication, sticking out your fangs and prolonging your tongue lashings? Are you not the children born of revolting rebellion, who rose up in clear defiance of the authority and the relationship by holding a grudge and remaining stubbornly indignant? Pisha, into discordant deflection and false interpretations, all contrary to God, lost, offensive, incensed, wantonly rebelling. The very seed of a shakir, a vain and useless liar who is a betrayer, a deceptive fraud, promoting a sham, a man of false pretenses and injurious testimony, of one who swears deceitfully and thereby disappoints by way of self-delusion. Yeshaya 57:4. addressing the demonic whores, malcontents. Yahweh, who is delivering this message, explains that they will be acting on their own initiative rather than on his instructions. God further insists that there will be no basis for their provocations. He says that their sense of self-entitlement is the result of an emotional outburst, with them becoming overly effeminate and sensitive rather than informed or rational. Then Yahweh lays down the gauntlet, prophetically proclaiming that the mean-spirited provocateurs would assuage their hurt feelings through mocking and slander, ridicule. By committing the ad hominem fallacy ad infinitum, without a valid justification, without actual guidance or provocation. He said they would become a clique of gossipy women, pathetically pursuing derision. They will define themselves by their exploitation and extortion. Having told all who were willing to listen in the 56th chapter of Yeshaya Isaiah that he would be revealing and enabling his tzedakah and nakar. At this time, Yahweh reveals that the boasts and tongue lashings of the betrayer's faithful are exceptionally ill-advised. But at the same time, we learn that they won't listen and that they will deny God's condemnation. They'll claim that it doesn't apply to them when it's obvious and irrefutable that it does. You have to be ill-informed and completely irrational to assume otherwise. Those promoting their mother God while slandering the herald of the Son of God are, according to God, a nag, which was scribed in the Hitpael Imperfect. This means that they, without any actual provocation or guidance, have become overly effeminate and sensitive, whiny bitches. They are self-centered and self-indulgent. They are crybabies who delight in ridiculing and mocking because they are pliable and easily swayed to incitement and derision. One would do well to avoid being called a nag by God. But I suppose the same would hold true for Manan, sorceress, Zana, whore, and Naaf, unreliable, as well as Shakir, a betrayer. Methinks Yahweh has a real serious bone to pick with these dysfunctional zombies. Rather than children of his covenant, Yahweh announces that they are Yeled Pesha, born of rebellion. And he's right. They remove themselves from the covenant, from Yahweh, from his Nakar, for no other reason than Pesha, defiance, indignance, and discord. When their claims have been found to be wholly untrue, when they claim to speak for a mother God that doesn't exist, and when everything they have posted is repudiated, rather than return to the fold, they demonstrated that they were shakir, they were vain, they were useless liars, they were repugnant betrayers, in God's terms, although I agree with them. Despicable deceivers. They are knowingly promoting a scam. Unable to defend their claims, they hide. They block access to their clique, proving that they weren't actually serving anyone other than themselves. Then, unable to detract an audience, they stooped to misappropriating my name. And so Yahweh reports that they are delusional and injurious, operating under false pretenses. This is Yahweh's primary concern. He has chosen and enabled his Nakar, prepared him over the years as an observant foreigner to awaken his people at this time from their stupor before his return, and this disrespectful and pretentious clique served to destroy his credibility, thereby negating our Father's intent. Now, nothing they say is true, and they haven't dented my credibility one iota. But in a world of unthinking individuals, where there is smoke, there is perceived to be a fire. And so it takes an idiot to slander. Any idiot can do it. To defend one's name, now that's a different story entirely. Because just by responding to the slanderers, you give them credibility. And if you ignore them, then those who come upon their lies assume they're true. According to God, the Anan, demonic woman, who is a Zana, despised whore, in concert with her Na'af, unreliable man, they're Shakur, betrayers. They're covetous, they're greedy, they crave what is not theirs to take, just like Shabuwah, just like Miriam, just like Michal. All stories that Yahweh directed our attention. They are in defiance of the Almighty as a result of a senseless grudge. And like so many Israelites throughout the ages, they're embittered and indignant. The fact that these wretched souls continually solicit followers by tongue lashing and hashtagging my name, God-given titles that I operate under, and a website devoted to our collaboration, as well as every social media sites that we frequented, is because of their intense acrimony. They've been whipped into a cantankerous frenzy. And as bad as that sounds, God has even more to say about those trying to topple the tree of knowledge, who is serving the ram and serving as the bull, while making this very personal, getting in the way of family business. God says, are you not those who burn with rage and are so intensely acrimonious, riled up, boiling over against Ha'el, the most prominent tree, as well as the ram, the doorway and the most prolific source of leadership? All in the orderly arrangement of the spreading out of the entirety of the flourishing and profusely productive Etz tree, thereby taking the lives of those who would otherwise be born with an inheritance from the Sha'if, the branch, and Hasala, the rocky crag. Isaiah 57:5. It's painful to read. I knew these people. They've done this to themselves, but they've taken others with them. And for that, God views this as unforgivable. Well, perhaps it's a guess on my part, but it's probably a bad life decision to have irritated God to this extent, to the point he refers to you and your group as chamam, intensely acrimonious, enraged and cantankerous. And then when he states that you have earned his wrath by spewing venom at his AL, most prominent tree, and his ram, well, it's time to reevaluate one's ambitions. You see, the Chodar is the tree of knowledge. And they should know that because God was explicit in communicating it. Yahweh is exceedingly protective of his AL, whether it is the ram, who is his beloved son, or the tree of knowledge who serves him and leads the world back to him. Not only is an AL the largest and most prominent tree, Etz is the Hebrew word for tree, and because this tree is the one God equipped as his Etz tree to Ranan, spread out and flourish, his mission is to Ranan, profusely be productive. He is, of course, describing the Etz Dayath, this tree of knowledge in the garden, that has been equipped by his Ruach spirit as the Chodar stem with the Etza Dayath, counsel of the tree, on everything pertaining to the tree of knowledge. By trying to poison the roots of God's tree, to trash its fruit, this mother goddess clique became the living embodiment of Shabuwah in Genesis 2. And the one who was stoned on God's instructions for uprooting the trees in Numbers 5. As a result, those speaking for their mother goddess are seen as Shakat ha-Yeled, taking the lives of those who would otherwise be born into the covenant. They have become spiritual murderers, not unlike Hasatan. These vicious malcontents are also depicted trying to steal the inheritance of God's people, plucking it from the Chodar's Seif branches and from the Ha-Selah, the crag. For this crime, there is no resolution. There'll be no forgiveness, according to Yahweh. There is also no obfuscating this indictment. This is specific to their character and to this crime. It was as indicting as Chabauk Habachuk to Shaul Paul. Just as he was identified as the plague of death, DP and Decrud are Shakur betrayers, along with their whole cadre of characters. Following a Anan, demonic woman, who is a Zanah, illicit whore, working through an Af, an exceedingly unreliable man. The reason that I highlighted the fact that everything mentioned in the previous statement was plural is that Yahweh is condemning the entire coterie of co-conspirators. Listen, these are not my words. They're God's. My job is to present them to you accurately and then to explain them in a way that all will understand. And God wants you to know they are all anag, unscrupulous. Now, this known from this point forward, God's condemnation is focused on one exceptionally evil woman. And we know this because every accusation henceforth is directed at a feminine, singular individual. And there is nothing in Yeshaya, Isaiah 57:5, which could serve as the feminine, female subject of this scathing rebuke. And it follows, and it's ongoing. And that leaves us with a single candidate when seeking to identify the Anah that Yahweh is directly speaking about on this day. the Shakor, great betrayer. So while I would just soon ignore them, they're worthless. God won't. He hasn't. And my job is to go where his words lead. I returned to this segment because my job was to share as much as I could glean about Shabuwah. And I knew that there was a passage, because I translated it years ago, that spoke of the beneficiaries of the Shabuwah harvest disappearing and the world around not knowing where they have gone. I've written 25,000 pages, 35 books. It's hard to remember exactly where every statement was that you've translated. I knew it was in Isaiah, but I didn't know what book I had written it in. And so I went even to the AI engines and I said, okay, there's some place that speaks of a harvest where people disappear and they don't know where they've gone. Where is that? I must have asked 5 AI engines that question 20 times and not one of them could find it. So I ended up rereading all of Isaiah because I knew it was there to find it. And my purpose in going to find it was to explain what I'm doing now, to explain what can be known about Shabuwah. It's important for you to know that there will be a harvest on Shabuwah and that those who are gathered will be so few and viewed as so meaningless to the world that no one's going to even notice they're gone except one group who wanted to be part of this harvest. And God has a lot to say about those people. That's not what I remembered when I translated the first time. I didn't go to this to out them. I didn't return to it to excoriate them. I went to it to explain the harvest. I am back to presenting Shabuwah as part of the basics on the Yada Yawa website for the express purpose of doing my job, which is to explain the things that are important for you to know. But I made a commitment a long time ago. And that is I would go where the words lead. And that I will never pluck a statement out of context and say, there you go, that's the answer. Because context is the great purveyor of understanding. And so I went through the 56th chapter and said, well, that's really prophetic of what we're doing, isn't it? And then I continued in the 57th past the point of people disappear. Because that's what I do. And that's what I've always done. And I'm never going to change that. And that is when we came upon this. And it's one of the most profoundly important prophecies pursuant not only to Shabuwah, but our mission on behalf of Yahweh at this time. And it tells you exactly where God stands. What you do with it is up to you. That's not my job. My job to tell you what God said and what it means and how it applies. So let it be known. According to Yahweh, the Anan, Zana, Shekher will reap what she has sown. And that is to be associated with an equally malignant cast of characters who are cast into Sheol. Your fate and assigned inheritance is among the illegitimate, smooth-talking, and insulting flatterers who feign praise and adoration, but are divisive. Their sorrow is your lot. Keep in mind, God has described the cast of characters that he is assailing. And it pertains to one very small group of people at this time. And he's saying, your fate is known. It's been allotted. Your inheritance is among the illegitimate, smooth-talking, and insulting flatterers who feign praise and adoration, but who are actually divisive. frauds, hypocrites. Their sorrow is your lot. After all, to them, you have poured out a drink offering with a fusion of ideas. You have elevated and overstated and offered up your own grain offerings as if they mattered. So why should I change my mind and relent, ceasing to be concerned about such things? Yashaya, Isaiah 57:6. So this is Yahweh's assessment and decision regarding the one who has devilishly mocked and slandered his Tzedakah Nakar at this crucial moment in time. And clearly, God isn't about to change his mind. In essence, Yahweh is acknowledging that he has encountered comparable rebellions and that he has dealt with them consistently and similarly. And of course, Chawa, Miriam, and Michal from Genesis 2, Numbers 12, and 2 Samuel 6 immediately come to mind, as does this rebuke in Isaiah 57. However, this is a bit different because this latter day, Anan Zana, initially feigned support and adoration for Yahweh's Nakar before contradicting herself and becoming so seductively divisive as the Shakir, the great betrayer. The lesson here is as clear as it is consequential. There is something deemed far worse than continuing to be overly religious or political. Something vastly more costly than being ignorant or apathetic. And that is to have been exposed to the truth. And then not only reject it, but repudiate it. And that, combined with the timing and the severity of this crime, is why the mother goddess clique has earned Yahweh's most comprehensive and condemning reprimand. The thing God has had to endure the longest, and that he regrets the most, is the fracturing of his family. It began, of course, immediately after the children of Israel were conceived, and it became untenable during the Exodus, only to continue unabated in the Promised Land. And now, on the cusp of delivering salvation, an especially horrendous breakup has occurred. One fixated on undoing all the God once accomplished. And for that, this sorrowful lot will be sorry forevermore. According to Yahweh, the woman he introduced in Isaiah 57:3, as someone deliberately conjuring a false spirit to obscure reality and blow smoke, as a sorceress and despised and loathed woman of ill repute, pandering to her partners for favors, while complaining that she was excluded from the Shabuwah harvest, is pouring out a toxic brew of inebriating concoctions that are essentially babble, because they comprise a confounding blend of commingled ingredients. Equally troublesome, she claims Shabuwah for herself, elevating and overstating her absurd claims regarding this offering of grain. Craving a role in God's story, she ascribed an undue and undeserved status to herself, as had been her custom over the years. She would be the mother speaking for the imaginary mother god. But since there is no such entity or voice, she lied about everything. So far as to change Yahweh's name and his gender identity to suit her situation. Yahweh, however, didn't much like being presented as a hermaphrodite and said, "So why should I change my mind and relent?" Ceasing to be concerned about these things. There are many subjects about which Yahweh is clear and uncompromising, beginning with his name and his nature. And as protective as God is regarding both, there is something about which he is even more defensive. Those through whom he speaks, those through whom he works to achieve his goals. They're more vulnerable, and God is far more concerned about them. This is particularly so of his son and of his son's beloved herald, and so much more. In this case, Yahweh has revealed that his Nakar, the observant foreigner, will, as the man from Edom and the Adamah Parah, serve as a witness on the Temple Mount before offering himself as a sacrifice to purge the returning remnant of their guilt. Knowing this, the sorceress has sought to place her cravings over God's plans. And since he has positioned her as a whore, Yahweh is continuing to flesh out the metaphor of wanton infidelity in contrast to the well-being of his covenant family. Rather than the bull's willingness to offer himself to save Israel, she is seen with a bed accommodating herself as the voice of her mother goddess. Isaiah presents Yahweh's testimony. Over the exalted mount, arrogantly through self-exaltation, and being carried away with desire, you have placed and made your bed. Additionally, there you ascribe status to yourselves while slaughtering the living. 57:7. Bad idea. Not only are we encouraged to listen to Yahweh and do as he instructs rather than as we desire, there are no beds associated with Mount Moriah. It is a place devoted to the affairs of God and his covenant family where we take a stand. And these things are brought to fruition through the fulfillment of the Moedim and not through personal indulgence. Further, it is Yahweh who ascribes status to his co-workers. We are correct in acknowledging his aspirations, but foolish in ascribing our ambitions to him or her, as their case may be. The consequence of doing so is shattered lives, embittered estrangement, and the demise of countless souls. This isn't something God takes lightly or will leave unpunished. With God, there is cause and consequence, and he's always fair, allotting what we deserve. And in this case, during the final countdown prior to his return, as the door to life in the garden is reopened, there the mother goddesses are trying to unhinge God's plans on the cusp of providing eternal and abundant life for so many. She would have Yahweh's Zikaron, most memorable of men, replaced by her own proverbs and maxims. And that's particularly funny because the fracture commenced with the Anan Zana falsely claiming that the 14th proverb, actually it was the 8th, spoke of her mother goddess, even when there is no mention of M, mother, even Ruach, spirit, and the whole Mashal. And the lone feminine subject is Chakma, intelligence, which is also presented in the 14th, by the way, afforded to the Choder. Something that they're clearly lacking. Then in the end, and at the backside of that door, at the door frame, and on the very cusp of abundant life, you have set up and placed your own memorial along with your maxims. Because indeed, separated and away from me, you're laid bare, revealing your bed and death bier. And you have climbed up on your bed, enlarging it opportunistically and greedily. So you've made a covenant with her against them, and you have loved their bed. You prefer and have inspected even their phalluses. Yeshaya, Isaiah 57:8. For those of you who have noticed that we've gone beyond our normal hour and a few minutes, and we're now an hour and 36 minutes into this program, I don't want to have to return to this. I want to complete it. You see, as I have said before, I knew these people. It pains me to know what they have brought upon themselves. But I need to share this as a warning, not only to those who might be lured into their company, but to those who are on the periphery of this group, but mostly for those who will be confronted by what they had to say, because while I'm not going to respond to them, God is. And he is very protective of those he has chosen to convey his message. You all right, going a little longer?
I'm good.
Captain of the cables?
We're good.
All right. Well, it has been blatantly obvious for more than a year now. This psychotic woman pursuing these caustic ambitions had assured her incarceration in Sheol, something Yahweh will affirm momentarily. Since there were women in her ranks that I once valued, I warned them. I shared that they were writing themselves out of the covenant, thereby excluding themselves from heaven. My many, many attempts to help them only made them more belligerent. And I finally gave up. And I realized that I had to leave them to their fate because they had chosen it for themselves. The more I tried to help them, the more antagonistic they became. As clearly as words allow, God has declared that these malcontent women and misled men are estranged from him. And there is no revolving door on heaven or in the covenant family. You can arrive on God's terms, or you can leave on your own. But if you do, there is no means of return. Because God will know that you can't be trusted. God knows that you would just irritate everybody else that he loves. In this case, however, those posturing the voice of their mother God have gone well beyond exiting the covenant. That was their choice. They could do so without God saying a word to them or even about them. According to Yahweh, they have made another arrangement with her, the Anan Zana, the demonic whore. And in cutting themselves into her situation, they are now seen as opposed to him, them, which would be Yahweh, Dod, and Yada. Karath la'ath men him. reveals that the men and women in league with and pandering for this cantankerous and vitriolic Zana have cut themselves into her situation, which is to be in opposition to those who will be taken during the Shabuwah harvest. They are thereby eternally banished and estranged along with her. They are now severed from us, having uprooted themselves, because they preferred to develop a relationship with her in opposition to Yahweh's covenant family, in opposition to the tree of knowledge, and in opposition to the Passover lamb. So they are not without a covenant, and thereby will suffer a communal fate. They have created their own covenant. It's just not with God. Now, I would like to remind everyone that in the 25 years of rendering Yahweh's testimony as accurately and as completely as possible, I have never before seen such a proliferation of feminine singular references. I haven't badgered you with them as I've read through this, but every verb was feminine singular. And they all point to the very anon diabolical woman that God introduced this rebuke by condemning. She remains the subject of this rebuke because Zana, in sincere horror, is deliberately conjuring demons to obscure reality as a sorceress while pandering for favorable treatment, all while protesting about being excluded from the Shabuwah harvest and heaven. As for God's concluding assessment, that is an inside joke between us. And that's assessment, the last statement that I just shared with you, the fallacies. You see, the most unhinged, well, I wouldn't say the most unhinged, but certainly psychotic of the sorceress's demons. It's a very sexually frustrated former alcoholic who has numerous psychotic issues, who has a history of bouncing between religious cults. Well, I don't know her personally. My wife tried to help her. And she repaid my wife's kindness by creating a website devoted to slandering me, someone she doesn't even know, complaining that I had killed her. Among her issues is a box containing a phallus of sorts that she bought online and had shipped to a longstanding friend of mine, whom my wife had introduced her to prior to knowing that she was Fruit Loops. You see, God has a sense of humor. And as would be expected, because she is so robust and unattractive, the Anan is a sexually deprived Zana, as are most of her supporters. They get really upset when I mention the fact that Eden was clothing optional, and that God has no issue with nudity. He has no issue with sexuality. He designed it. And that we're returning to the garden, which means that that which was will be. They obviously aren't comfortable being exposed to God, which is why we were directed to the story of Michal and of Dod dancing naked from the ephod down, because he knew that by anointing that mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant on Kippurim as the high priest, upon his return, that we would all be returning to the garden. And that's why he was so joyous and wearing the appropriate dress for Eden. He was rebuked, of course, by Michal. And that is a story that God directed our attention to and that we shared in rebuke. Now, after continually denouncing Yahweh's Choder, his Nakar, his Zeroah, and the very Adama Para of Teruah. The mother goddesses turned against Do, denying his many lives, particularly the one where he served as our savior by fulfilling the spring Moedim. Theirs became an especially toxic brew of diabolical deceptions, all designed to deny King Dode's return. And in so doing, they ignorantly played themselves right into Satan's hands while doing everything in their power to mask the stench. Those pretending to speak for a spirit mom are so entrenched in their pagan mythology that they have become continually contentious, imposing themselves into the midst of a story that was not supposed to be about them. And here is the problem with that. Hanakar's primary purpose has been and remains to reintroduce Yahweh's name while reacquainting Israel with the fact that Dode is returning as the Messiah, the Son of God, and Savior, who redeemed them by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. Without this knowledge, everyone misses the Shabuwah Katsir, as well as the Teruah Lakat. The sacrifice of the Adama Para does not occur. There is no mortal remnant that is salvaged in Jerusalem on Teruah, nor a homecoming on Yom Kippurim, not even a return to the garden on Sukkah. So opposing all of this is Satan's goal. If any aspect of the foregoing doesn't occur as foretold, Satan wins and the earth is destroyed, along with the human experiment. And so now, with everything riding on his collaboration with his Nakar, observant foreigner, who has come to be Sadaka, right about God, and vindicating this Anan, sorceress, and Zanah, whore, who is Shakur, the betrayer, has joined Hasatan, the adversary, in trying to preclude Yahweh's and Dode's return on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. This is the ultimate crime, because without the Nakar, none of this occurs. God is all in with one man bearing many titles, and quite frankly, the weight of the world on his shoulders. It is why the Choder is equipped like none before him, with the 7 Ruach spirits of Yahweh: Chakma, intelligence; Bena, understanding; Etzah, the comprehensive counsel, is the tree; Gabora, courage and conviction; Diath, knowledge; and Yara, admiration and respect, in addition to the very Ruach Yahweh. He is therefore Shazak, resolute in his resolve and determination, in his purpose, unshakable in his conviction, firm in his approach, ferocious in his defense, uncompromising in his commitment, and unrelenting in his mission. It is why there are upwards of 1,000 prophecies regarding his deployment at this time. It is why Yahweh is so condemning of this Shakir, betrayer. Now, God no doubt wanted my wife and I to experience an embittered taste of what he has endured with the children of Israel over the past 40 centuries. He's done this before. It's why he asked Hosea to marry a religious whore, so we could empathize. It's why Moshe experienced a revolt, not once, but many times. It's why Dode had to endure a coup. This is how we develop shared senses of empathy which is needed to persist against a target audience of chronic malcontents. But more than this, it's apparent that Yahweh wanted to send another essential message. We are capable of being Aman, reliable, consistent, steadfast, as well as Shazak, consistently dependable and resolute. When we are Sadaka right, we can earn God's trust. We can prove worthy by getting back up when we fall, by learning from our mistakes and growing from them, and by engaging collaboratively such that we make the world a better place. Yahweh isn't asking us to be perfect and wouldn't even want it to be that way, because that would be not only unachievable, but it would be boring and would leave nothing as an opportunity to grow and to prove our value. There'd be nothing to learn, nowhere to go. So God wants us to be observant, to engage, and to be steadfast such that he can trust us. This was my test. And now God is announcing the result. We were both exposed to the same Torah guidance and instructions. Upon Shamar close examination and careful consideration, I've been declared Tzedakah correct, earning the title of Ha-Nakar, the observant foreigner. I have chosen to go where Yahweh's words lead. But choice requires an alternative, a serpent in the garden, so to speak. And since Satan has allowed, or was allowed inside of Gan Eden, to seduce Shabuwah, her namesake was allowed into the covenant family for the same purpose, luring souls away from God, 6,000 years removed from the initial confrontation. This was deliberate. It was actually a necessary line of inquiry, the opportunity to make a final and enduring decision. Now, since eternity is forever in the covenant family, Yahweh must build a protective wall around it, as, well, he did by surrounding Eden. In this regard, while we get to choose God, he also has the opportunity and responsibility to decide among us as well. And this is one of my greatest concerns initially in writing the books of Yada Yahweh. I was always apprehensive of giving too much away, of making it too easy for the casual observer to meet the baseline requirements of the covenant, even when their character and convictions were inadequate. And now I know that Yahweh, he resolved my concern. He weeded out those who do not belong. The shaman, calloused and unresponsive, ignorant fatling, concocting her babble, confounding commingling of truth and lies, would be allowed to shalak, dispatch her seer, unhinged and twisted messenger, each of them as adversarial envoys. Her odd witnesses would rokok, alienate and estranged, separating themselves from God and his covenant family. But in so doing, at this time, to thwart our King's glorious return to his family, in this way, she and her cronies will have earned the worst possible outcome. Yahweh says, you have consistently contended with, imposing yourselves over the approach of the king. Calloused, unresponsive, ignorant, and fat. You have increased and you have multiplied your mixtures and compounds, even as perfumes, ointments, and salves. Then you dispatched, sending out your unhinged and twisted messengers and anguishing, idolatrous envoys to cause distress and anxiety, while you besiege on behalf of yourself in highly adversarial fashion, as witnesses into perpetuity, eternally alienated and estranged, as remote, distant, and separated as is possible in space and time, even as you are humiliated and cast down forever to Sheol. Yashaya, Isaiah 57:9. And there it is, off to hell, just as I had forewarned and foretold. So, Mrs. P, are you enjoying playing the starring role in this prophetic betrayal? Isn't that what you have coveted all along? I think, as does Yahweh, that it is fitting now for you to rename yourself and your adversarial accounts, channels, and websites Anag, derision, of the Anan, demonic woman, and Zana, illicit whore, who is the Shakur, the great betrayer. I'll wager that the URLs are available and that they have your name written all over them. Surely, your Na'af, unfaithful one, he can acquire them for you. It's hard to know what to add once Yahweh dispatches someone you once tried to help, and he sends them off to Sheol. But it's not like me to walk away from the scene of a crime this hellish without providing guidance. Well, we're going to continue our review of this material tomorrow. We've made it through the turning point, which is what I wanted to achieve tonight, so I never have to go back to it. But we're speaking of Shabuwah, and I'm going to tell the whole story, because everyone deserves to know who's going to make the harvest and who is not, who is going to be left behind, and who's going to suffer a far worse fate than that. I thank you for listening. I look forward to being with you again tomorrow.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.